On 3, this is an area of development contributions. This is an area where there's been some further work and refinement of the submission since the version of the submission circulated on Tuesday was completed. Some minor changes. I will speak to them as they arise, but initially what we're seeking is that the move from Watercare as it currently collects its infrastructure growth charge is seamless as it moves to collect development contributions. And this is that the commencement of the Act be adjusted to sync with the LTP and cycle of council, that it's clear that Watercare continues to collect IGCs until there is an operative policy, and that the provisions that apply to enable the development of that policy kick in time to allow the policy to be made operative in synchronisation with the LTP. So really just looking to ensure that it's a smooth process. Early engagement. The development contributions provisions enable Watercare or Water Services CCOs to require an amendment to development contributions policies. This is just to ensure that the collection matches the capital works programs that cater for growth. We're behind this, it's a slightly different arrangement for Watercare to move to development contributions. Their expertise is in water services with their engineering and asset management. In council we have significant expertise with development contributions as it's been done in the finance department for quite some time. The idea is that with early engagement we can share that expertise and move more quickly through the development of any policy. Next, we have, same one, Louis. On that consideration, this is one of the areas where, as a balance in terms of the development of any policy that council would be required to adopt, we're just seeking that it's more consistent, or there is a requirement that such policy is not inconsistent with strategies and policies. This is consistent with the key message throughout the submission that Auckland Council Group is working in a concerted manner to address the urban issues, future land supply, development capacity, the provision of infrastructure to priority areas all play into that space, and we're just ensuring or seeking to ensure that the bill and its provisions are very clear. This is one of the amendments that was refined, and the version now in front of you, version 9, is slightly different. The recommendation and the changes we seek outlined in Appendix 2 are unchanged, but the discussion paragraphs under 4.2.3 are clearer and give a clearer explanation to the Select Committee as to what we're seeking and why. It's a relatively minor change. The main thing is that we are continuing to seek the agreement to a change that we had been seeking all along. Just on the next point, Crown exemptions. This is one where we see that the movement of Watercare into the DC's framework would be perhaps prejudicial to Watercare. Currently, the development contributions provisions in the Local Government Act do not apply to the Crown. Currently, Watercare is able to collect an infrastructure growth charge from the Crown, and there would be a shortfall as a result of the transition. In keeping with the idea that the change should be seamless, we're just seeking to make it clear that there will not be prejudice in that instance, and that revenues, etc., are not impacted. Lastly, and as alluded through, there is a number of areas where we're just seeking clarification. I've outlined the one in terms of substantive CCOs. There was also some question of the way in which multiply owned CCOs are addressed. We suspect that there is a drafting error, where a provision says either it does apply or doesn't apply, but we think that it means it should actually be the opposite. We would like that clarified. In terms of the reorganisations, it's a drafting error that Soljum has identified, and we're largely supporting that submission. And for the service delivery and infrastructure plans, they are new, introduced, applied to new CCOs, and we're just seeking clarity as to how they might apply in Auckland and for a future CCO. And that largely brings us to the end of our submission. The submissions were put together, and we have also received local board input. We have received local board input from Aoraki and Waiheke, so 2 of our local boards have provided that input. There were 4 points raised by the Aoraki local board. 3 touched upon reorganisation issues, which are outside of the scope of the bill, and would seek to amend parts of the Local Government Act and other legislation that are not addressed in the bill. We haven't addressed those matters in the submission. We see them as outside. There is a question also raised about CCO accountability and strengthening the requirement to give effect to. That matter has been addressed in the submission, but not in the way that the board sought. The board is seeking that it would apply in the case of elected representatives rather than in the case of the shareholder. So a slight distinction there. Performance measures are supported, and that matter is addressed in the submission. The Treaty of Waitangi issue was spoken of in a roundabout way, not directly in the way in which we've addressed it in the submission, but rather more in the context of representation, which is outside of scope and so not addressed in the submission.
Okay, so we've got a, sorry.
Okay. There is further detail with Waiheke. We have some paper that we will be approving and will be attached to the minutes that sets out the detail. I can speak to it if there's a wish, but otherwise we could perhaps go to the recommendations.
Well, we've got a question from Councillor Lee. You got a question?
Yeah, before I ask the question, I have to say I am dismayed at how this matter is being treated and how the governing body is being treated in this matter. But you know, the submission's closed on Friday, and we get a paper. Was it this morning? And we've had very little time to address very important fundamental questions. But my question is, you're seeking clarification in regard to the bill's references to Auckland Transport. What clarifications are you seeking, may I ask?
Perhaps in the paper in front of you, if I could refer you to page 18, the point there, 5.2. So the bill's definition is Transport Services Council controlled organisation, which specifically excludes Auckland Transport. While we note that Auckland Transport is referred to in the Local Government Auckland Act, a new Transport Services CCO could fall within the definition, which would create some difficulty. It relates back to definitions in 2 separate bills and the way in which they work together. I would also point out that the submission that has been prepared and put before you is made jointly with Auckland Transport.
What about the... I'll talk about this, Mr Chairman, in a minute when we get on to general discussion, but what about the Bill's assumptions all the way through that, first of all, CCOs equate with better efficiency and better, was it, local services? I take it you wouldn't challenge that assumption.
The submission itself doesn't directly address that assumption, as explained. The model of local government in Auckland is set by legislation under the Local Government Auckland Council Act.
I'm only one of... Anyway, we'll leave that. I have a personal experience to challenge that more efficient assumption. But leaving that aside, what is the council saying about the Local Government Auckland Amendment Act and the provision for the Auckland council, with the governing body, to appoint elected councillors, 2 of them, to the Board of Auckland Transport.
The bill doesn't address the issue or raise the issue, so we have not addressed it in our submission at all.
But in terms of your clarification, are you not raising that question actually?
No, we're not seeking clarification. We're seeking clarification of the drafting of the bill and how it works, but not to the Act which has been established of some time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lee, this...
I'll talk later.
This has been through a working party. I think we've met twice. Councillor Webster, there was Councillor Anai, Councillor Walker, Mr Taipari, myself. So
I've had no feedback.
Well,
Submission
Councillor
arrived
Walker,
on Monday.
Councillor Lee, obviously I think we asked who would volunteer to be part of it, and that's how it came about. So I think we've had 2 meetings with the officers. And
Through the chair, the workshop was held with the committee,
Yes, it
and
was.
at that
Yeah.
workshop it was resolved that there would be a working party established to work with staff to develop this submission.
yeah, I remember I sat here, it was at a month ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we got an extension of about a week so that the submission could come back to this committee to be ratified. So it has been
And we got
kind
this
of,
on Monday.
it has been kind of
Monday or Tuesday.
teased out quite considerably.
Are
But
you
anyway,
saying this came out on Monday?
Monday or
Tuesday.
Tuesday, it
And then-
certainly was
Okay,
on
so
my
is there any
desk.
other questions? Comments? Councillor Casey?
Just in relation to the Minister's powers and the polling. The first one about the Minister's power to direct. What you're recommending doesn't really do it for me. It's you want to tell him to keep his fingers out of our pie, really.
We are a figment of statute.
We are.
The Waiheke Local Board got it right. Tell the Minister, or direct that power, that Minister's power to direct be removed. Why can't we say that?
What we've addressed is how the bill works and its
Well, it's under
workability.
government.
Yes.
We recognise that the Minister of Local Government has responsibility for the system of local government in New Zealand. Where there's a new model where the Minister has a relationship with the Commission, we've recommended or requested that the Minister's expectations be published to improve transparency. We've also suggested that those powers be exercised subject to the legislation that's relevant. As noted, we are a creature of statute and the powers vest in the government.
Thank you. Councillor Hulse? Sorry.
The second one was on polling. There is no threshold of significance before. By poll, do we mean referendum? Is that the interchangeable?
There are specific provisions, but yes, it is where the
So
public gets
there's
the
no-
opportunity to vote on a proposal.
Excellent. Whatever the word is, it's fine with me. There is no threshold of significance before a poll is triggered. Why not? I would suggest, for example, the introduction of a motorway network charge is one that should trigger a referendum.
The poll is a part of the process of reorganisation, so it's very specific to where there is an investigation that's been undertaken by the Commission. It then proposes a reorganisation plan and then works through on how that might be implemented. Ultimately, it would be implemented through an order in council by regulation. Once the Commission is committed to a reorganisation plan, the polls and so forth are the way in which the community is involved in the proposal that's being considered.
So you wouldn't recommend a threshold?
It's more that it's very specific to this process and not applicable to other issues.
But well answered.
Hulse?
Thank you. I apologise, Mr Chair, I just had to dash away and do something else. I don't know if this was covered, but at the local government conference, a pretty strongly worded remit was passed, which kind of picked up Councillor Casey's point. Local government in general is not happy with this, and there certainly is a concern about the ability for the Local Government Commission to direct the setting up of CCOs. So whilst we've prepared this submission quite rightly and acknowledging the work of the group who've put this together, we've prepared this from our position, which is, well, we've already got them because we're a different creature of statute. There is something in there which says to the rest of New Zealand, they're pretty grumpy with the idea that the Local Government Commission can point the finger and say, well, we think you should set up some CCOs, which is effectively amalgamation by stealth.